Welcome, everyone, to the Wednesday weekly rankings edition here with Jim Coventry, of course, entering week 8. We have our set here of bye Mageddon with 6 teams on bye, 4 teams the following week, 4 teams after that. Thankfully, I suppose a few of these teams are so awful, you're doing yourself a service that you don't have to play a few of them, but this will be tricky times in the waiver wire. It did not really yield any massive windfalls either. I guess outside of the Nico Collins, Mike Evans Monday injuries, we're stuck at situations that are still speculative, like Isaiah Davis, who I keep on the table for, or even Trey Benson, if he's somehow still available in your leagues, speculating on when the Cardinals backfill, what that looks like afterwards. So going over the weekly rankings here with Jim, and again, you can see those up there right now. We always start with the quarterback position first, and I think this was the one, I would almost say theoretically, Jim, that was least damaged by all the teams on bye. Not that there weren't critical teams, but more so like there's a decent amount of it. And then you have the injuries here as well. Jaden Daniels expected not to play this week, and the replacement of Tyrod Taylor for Justin Fields as well, changing the hierarchy a little bit. Let's kick things off with the thing that I'm going to just be admitting my fault on here, Jim. I had recommended to people 3 weeks ago when Jackson Dart was named the starter ahead of that Chargers game in New York that no issue with Jackson Dart, the prospect. I wasn't like super high on him entering the draft, but I understood the premise and I believed in Brian Dable. It was Chargers, Eagles, Broncos, Eagles, 49ers. The next 5 weeks that Jackson Dart was playing, there's zero reason why you'll ever have him in your lineup. Wrong. Could not have been more wrong. Jackson Dart has been fantastic. And I see this week you have him ranked number 9 in a repeat match against the Eagles.
How do you not? So here it was. So first of all, Dart's not a good quarterback. Get that on the table right now. He's a terrible NFL quarterback. But we saw it with Brian Dable before. He did it with Daniel Jones, 4 years ago? Mm-hmm. Smoke and mirrors. Brian Dable is the king of smoke and mirrors, and it will work for a number of weeks. Basically with him starting like from week 5 on, it could last the rest of the season. So very good. But as a passer, there's zero there. There is 0 there. But that said, teams, I thought Denver, because when I watched the Philly game where Dart went off, I said, real simple, play man coverage, put extra bodies up front. And Denver did. That's how Denver plays. So I thought this would be doom for Dart. Well, Daniel Bellinger doesn't get covered. Smoke and mirrors was an 80-yard touchdown or a 70-yard touchdown or whatever, a long touchdown to Bellinger, deflection touchdown. Mm-hmm. Nix didn't run. I'm sorry. Dart didn't run for anything against Denver. That blueprint, that worked. But the smoke and mirrors in the passing game, that kept working. So you play Jackson Dart as a QB1. First week, he didn't get 54 yards rushing. But he's going to go back against Philly because he killed them first time. Now, remember, here's one thing, disclosure. Vic Fangio has tape on him. And also, Quinyon Mitchell and Jalen Carter will play this time. It's going to be a big difference, but I still can't rank Dart lower because he has 4 weeks of QB1 production.
Yeah, I think that's a key part. And the mobility part, maybe we've talked about this, is why Justin Fields is the guy I liked entering the year. I didn't expect him to play so poorly that he would get benched for Tyrod Taylor, but that's part of it from a fantasy perspective. Somebody in the chat's asking, didn't Jackson Dart get Jalen Waddle? That is not a real site. I have not seen that transaction actually occur, announced by NFL teams. That could still happen. We heard about the Giants evidently sniffing around Chris Olave or Jacoby Myers or Jalen Waddle, but that has not officially transpired. If that's on the table at all, I don't know. I don't know why it makes sense for the Dolphins to do that, given they're going to be in salary cap purgatory for Tua probably next offseason, certainly, and if they release Tyreek Hill, going to be a tough spot. So I would assume you're not also seeing Jalen Waddle moved. They signed him a couple of years ago, but it's certainly possible if you get in the second round pick for him. I could see that happening. So Dart being up there in the top 10 is really interesting. We talked about Jaden Daniels being out more than likely. Marcus Mariota against the Chiefs. There might be some people with 6 teams on bye where you're here's Marcus Mariota or Joe Flacco, for example. And Mariota proved to be okay, serviceable if you were really in 2 quarterback leagues a couple weeks ago when he was starting. The status of Deebo Samuel and Terry McLaurin, I do think, matters a lot here against the Chiefs this week.
So, yes, Marcus Mariota, I just want everybody to remember this. He stepped in on a few occasions for Jaden Daniels, and he has had some very, very fortunate matchups, and he's done well with those. But just don't forget, the more Marcus Mariota's out there, the more film is out on him in this offense, and the easier he is to stop. Now, Terry McLaurin could be back this week. It looks like Deebo Samuel is going to – it was a 1-week thing, it looks like.
Okay.
The talk was he'd be in full practices this week. So I don't know if it was like a heel bruise or what the deal was, but apparently he's going to be back. It helps. But they're playing Kansas City. And Kansas City isn't the lights-out defense, but Mariota's not a very difficult quarterback to trick, and I would imagine that Spagnuolo will have a decent game plan for it. Mariota's still a streamer. I mean, a streamer if you're in a desperate spot, or obviously a super flex option.
Right. Yeah, I think that's kind of the call I'd have for Marcus Mariota as well too. Again, you look at the other options out there; it's just a little bit bleak. And I'm going over I guess I was looking at your weekly rankings here, and I saw Drake May listed number 7 against the Browns with the red marker. For those who are just watching this for the first time, it's not that you're saying don't play Drake May, but just there might be the ceiling play is not as exactly likely to occur in this matchup. And we've watched the Browns defense be really effective. Drake May has been awesome, and I think has taken the NFL by storm over the past 3 or 4 weeks. The Patriots have a lot of easy matchups to come. Can I at least tease the idea, Jim, that if you have Drake May and somebody's willing to pay the 100% price tag for him, I'd be willing to trade him, because I wonder if the Patriots might be in a position where they can rely on their rushing attack and maybe Drake May throwing for 210 yards or whatever and still win these games pretty convincingly.
It's a tough call. I lean more to saying you're totally right on that. Ramondre Stevenson, when the matchup's right, he looks really good. Mm-hmm. You can tell that team does not want to use Travion Henderson. They have proven they do not want to use him. They had some garbage time. Terrell Jennings got work. Please, I don't understand what's going on there. But they don't want to use Henderson. So, like I said, whatever goes on in practice, I can't really explain that because I'm not there. But there's something the coaching staff sees that they don't feel he's ready for a prominent role. And Stevenson's very week to week. If they face a team that's a decent rush defense, he'll tend to struggle. So May is one of those players. He's been like a QB1 most weeks. He can run some weeks. He's always put multiple touchdowns up. He's really a wonderful quarterback. I mean, he has really developed nicely and fast, right, Joe? But like you said, if you drafted May, you probably drafted him on the borderline of the QB1s, so you probably have another quarterback. You probably drafted somebody else. And if your other quarterback was a hit, you're right. Move him.
Last quarterback that I'll bring up is Bo Nix, who, if you watched 3 quarters of that game last week against the Giants, you would have thought, boy, Broncos might be drafting a quarterback this point next offseason. I'm not entirely convinced that still won't happen. I think Bo Nix has been a dramatic disappointment, and I understand he was a top 10 pick. Sean Payton's have been invested in him. Broncos probably can't move off of him. But here goes 4 touchdowns later against the Giants in the fourth quarter. That 33 points ends up setting an NFL record. And Bo Nix gets, I think conventionally most leagues, 40 fantasy points and completely goes nuclear 4-year leagues. Now you get the Dallas Cowboys defense, which I suppose has looked better by default, which was the worst in the league and now might be like 3rd worst. But what's going to happen here? Is the Dallas defense once again going to be miserable, or is Bo Nix, who has not looked good this entire year after a very good rookie campaign, will he finally turn things around against this defense?
Yeah, I was one of the analysts calling out Nix last year on his footwork. I said, yeah, it worked out for fantasy and it was great. And he was running the ball because they had no running game. I go, this year they got a semblance of a running game, so he's probably not going to run a lot. Now you have him as a passer. His footwork is awful. You never know where the ball is going because his feet are never set right. And they got to do these modified rollout things. You could tell that Sean Payton's hiding his quarterback.
Yes, I agree.
He's using very limited things to try to get him some success. And for fantasy, Nix has had 3 awful games, and it would have been 4, like you said, but that fourth quarter was crazy and it happened. So all that said, Dallas's defense, it's a tough call because they're not talented, but some weeks they get some things done. I don't know what Sean Payton's going to do, and that's the biggest question with Nix. There's upside because Denver may have to score a boatload of points because Dallas is going to score. Dallas scores every week. So if they're in a shootout, Nix is going to have to find a way to contribute, and he can. So it could be, again, one of these wild games. That's why I have him as 16 with an upside marker. He could have one of those games, but we have just seen bad quarterback play week after week. And if Dallas has some kind of a game plan and they recognize some of his weaknesses, you could totally pick at those. 2
of Bo Nix's crucial throws in that win over the Giants were literally not to the person he completed the pass to. Right. It wasn't like it was a tipped ball. It was he overthrew it, and then multiple people caught those passes. Like, it just is. I don't know. I was not a Bo Nix guy coming out of Oregon. I was not a fan of him going to the top 10. I have not been a fan of Sean Payton and his shtick really during his Denver tenure as well, too. So I am biased in this. I do not think Bo Nix is anywhere near even the upper echelon of NFL quarterbacks. If you said he was like the 16th or 20th best in the NFL, I'll be like, okay, fine. I don't want to really split hairs or debate the merits. But either way, fantasy-wise, what Bo Nix gives you on the ground a little bit, and in conventionally good matchups, like what I think this one is, Be interesting. Now, the pass rush for the Cowboys has been doing a lot better as well, too, over the past 3 weeks, and maybe that makes a factor against this Broncos team. But I'm with you. I mean, we can have the upside marker for Bo Nix, but quarterback 16 is probably where I'd sit him. Is there any other quarterbacks you want to talk about, or are we good to move over to the running backs?
Aaron Rodgers, I don't know what to do with him this week because it's the Rodgers Bowl. They're playing Green Bay. He gets it out quick. Oh my gosh, all those passes to tight ends last week. Poor DK Metcalf. I guess if you're in a super flex league, I moved Rodgers up to 18 just because of the narrative behind the game. I didn't put him in any great range. Normally, it's like quarterback 25 for me. I just didn't know what to do with that, Joe.
I think every starting tight end has either 6 catches or over 70 yards against the Packers all season. I don't know what to make when the Steelers have 3 in Darnell Washington, Pat Fryer with Jonnu Smith. Now, Darnell Washington is going to be used as a pass catcher. And you think about the quick passes, I think 2 weeks ago with Joe Flacco and the Bengals against the Packers defense, that was perfectly set for Jamar Chase and T against to just destroy that cornerback group. I think Metcalf can absolutely do the same thing. It's hard to do the tight ends and have that sort of quick pass, and maybe that's my only one solace for this game. I am very nervous as a Packer fan. I do think Aaron Rodgers will go nuclear in some way, and I hope Jordan Love keeps pace. That's sort of what I'm thinking is going to end up happening Sunday Night Football with the Steelers and Packers.
And last thing, Joe, what I said about Flacco when he came over, it's come to pass. I said as soon as he got there, they'll run shotgun. He'll get the ball out fast. He's got Chase and Higgins. Defense aren't going to hit him because they're not going to have time to get to him. And that's exactly how it's playing out. And now he has a mini bye. So playing off of last week, Thursday, he's going to be even more effective because now he's actually going to know where Chase and Higgins are. So Joe Flacco is a borderline QB1. He's not going to run. He had that 12-yard run on that design of RPO craziness. I don't think he knew what the play was. But anyway, that said, Flacco's going to really stabilize that offense, and it helps Chase Brown, who we might talk about later.
We talked about the 6 teams on bye. It really didn't affect quarterbacks, but if you look at the attrition, it certainly has at running back when Jalen Warren is running back 14, DeAndre Swift's running back 13, Chase Brown running back 16, one of the bigger disappointments in all of fantasy right now. When you have the Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomerys, and Kenneth Walkers, and Zach Charbonnet, and Kyron Williams, and Travis Etienne's, it's just a lot that you're going to be missing here. So if you are at all in leagues where you're like, I'm going to have to go ahead and start, for example, I don't like Tajay Spears, just understand a lot of people are going to be in the same boat. Hopefully your opponent is as well, too, with 6 teams on bye. Looking at the running back position, we had news that Aaron Jones has been activated off of injured reserve for the Vikings. The split for Jordan Mason and Aaron Jones was already leaning towards Mason's favor before Aaron Jones got hurt, now coming back here week 8. I don't really feel like it affects too much for me with Jordan Mason. I'm more so worried about this matchup overall Thursday against the Chargers. Now, their defense has been banged up. They did get Khalil Mack back and Denzel Perryman back last week. Jonathan Taylor went nuclear, but Jonathan Taylor's not against every opponent. Is the Vikings rushing attack in a good enough spot for you to feel comfortable to play either one or both of Jordan Mason and Aaron Jones this week?
Mason is a moderate floor play, and you hope he finds the end zone. When he finds the end zone, he's fine, but I don't think we're going to see big rushing games here. The offensive line's getting healthier, though, and that will help. Brian Kelly is on IR, the center. That really hurt. That's been frustrating for them. And it's also hurt their quarterback because he would be calling protections for them. Carson Wentz, I know he's a veteran, but he's Carson Wentz. And then whoever else would end up putting back there, whether it's McCarthy or it's Brosmer, they're going to bring him in there. They won't this week. They're going to start Wentz. But it's been a problem. But so, yeah, I think Mason's just a floor play, and you hope he scores a touchdown. You're hoping for like 60 yards, and there'll be weeks where he gets more. It's going to be really hard to predict those weeks, though.
One of the more frustrating backfields was the Seattle one. Thankfully, that's on bye. We don't have to worry about that. Let's reintroduce that 2.0 in Carolina with Rico Dowdle and Chuba Hubbard in their first game, both back healthy. Ends up being a pretty good 50-50 split in terms of carries. Rico Dowdle ends up doing far more. At some point, are the Panthers just going to transition away from Chuba Hubbard? You called this last week that with Hubbard healthy, the Panthers are going to have Chuba Hubbard be the guy that at least starts the game, gets the carries, but once again, ineffective. At what juncture, at least from when you've been analyzing fantasy football, do you think a team goes from one guy to the other guy as their main back?
They can't do it. They just simply can't do it. Dowdle's on a 1-year, $3.5 million deal. Chuba Hubbard's a team captain. He's on the second year of a big money 4-year deal. They can't do it. They can maybe go 60-40 at some point, game to game. And maybe some games, if it's a hot hand, then maybe Dowdle will get the 60 and Hubbard will get the 40. But if Hubbard's playing well at all, Hubbard's going to get the 60. So it's just the business of football. And if they do that with Hubbard, now they got a running back contract with a running back that's going to have a negative attitude toward it, I would imagine. Right. It's just not a good football situation from a business standpoint.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about Breece Hall being traded to the Jets. I've mentioned on my waiver wire article now the past 3 weeks and the podcast as well too. There are multiple teams that could use running backs. I mentioned the Bears, for example. I know that Kyle Monangai ends up doing pretty good last week, but a guy like Rico Dowdle, who's relatively cheap, that could work in conjunction with DeAndre Swift. I almost wonder if the Panthers are now, unfortunately, or I guess fortunately for them, but unfortunately for fantasy managers, have a good enough record where maybe they're not trying to sell pieces off. But I still think Rico Dowdle is a trade asset in some way, shape, or form is something that I could possibly see happening to sort of alleviate this and get a positive return out of if you are the Panthers. Interesting green mark here with Tyler Algier at number 29. It's only because you can't put Bijan Robinson higher than number 1. And we go look at this Dolphins run defense, one of the worst in the league. Quinshon Judkins goes nuclear. We think the Dolphins, if they don't fire Mike McDaniel by the end of this recording, will have done so by next week as well. It's entirely possible the Falcons could end up having 200-yard rushers because if I'm Atlanta, there's no reason to have Bijan play after the third quarter with how this game probably ends up going.
Yeah, Algier is a strong start if you're in a pinch here. He has 2 games with 16 carries already. Atlanta has been very, very good at home, and that's where they're playing. And Miami is very, very bad wherever they play. And they're a terrible run defense. Now, last week they were able to sell out on Judkins because Cleveland doesn't have a passing attack. But you can't really do that with Drake London out there and Kyle Pitts to a lesser degree. So you can't really just say we're putting everybody down to stop the run. And they had the wind and the rain there too in that last game. That's not possible. And Atlanta has a great run game. So yes, Robinson's going to crush. Algier probably going to get another 16 carry game. Like you said, if they were up big enough, he could just totally be the closer late in this one. So yeah, I just think, look, we've seen it before. Atlanta wants to run the football and they can. That's what they want to do. So they are going to run. And if they get a big lead, I'm worried. I'm a little worried for Drake London. And I didn't have the guts to put a downside tag on him because he's Drake London and he gets targets.
Right.
But if they go up 14-0 in the first quarter, it's on 2 rushing attacks. I could see Penix throwing like 15 passes.
The conditions against that Browns team last week were literally made for the Dolphins to stop the run. Because there was no threat of the passing attack. Dylan Gabriel can't pass anyway. The Browns won no business of actually passing the football, and yet they still allowed 3 touchdowns and 80 yards rushing to Quinshon Judkins when it was literally perfect circumstances. Entered the Falcons here, who could be going hog wild by the end of the second quarter with Bijan and Tyler Algier. Yeah, what's up?
Real quick, I forgot about this. Michael Penix, it's Wednesday morning, so we don't have a practice work. He has a bone bruise in his foot, I believe. And so we don't know for sure he's going to play this week, which would even put the run game heavier because my guess is they don't want to turn Kirk Cousins loose. I had to add that.
Yeah, that's a good point. And the Falcons already passed their bye, so this isn't a situation where they try to sit Penix 1 week to get him healthy and 2 or whatever. That's a good point. We'll have to see. Again, we're recording early Wednesday morning. Lamar Jackson, for example, didn't practice Monday. I don't know if we've heard that he was supposed to be ready to play. We haven't had that information yet. As somebody that needs Lamar Jackson in a few places, I'm anxiously waiting to see what the practice report is for the Ravens. And I think the Falcons are another good example as well too. We had news early today that Hassan Haskins was not going to play for the Chargers, so it's Kamani Vidal and then basically nobody else for that Chargers rushing attack. Only issue is the offensive line is in tatters, and we have the Vikings, which are a very good defense, conventionally pretty good with what Brian Flores does. I think will present issues for Justin Herbert as well. So even though Vidal has the backfield effectively to himself, he still ends up being outside the top, like the RB2 range in fantasy.
This is going to be a weird game to watch, but yeah, it's going to be hard to run. Those tackles interior, you got Jonathan Allen, you got Javon Hargrave. They've been very good, and it's very hard to run inside on them. So Vidal is not in a good spot here at all. I have him as 27 with downside because you could literally see that 10 carries for 15-yard game here.
Right.
And I do think the way to attack Minnesota is by testing their corners. And the only thing Justin Herbert's have to worry about is when they drop players into coverage and it's like unexpected players they drop at the snap. As long as he's good with that, though, he should be able to slice and dice with the 3 recent candidates, McConkey, Allen, and of course, Aronde Gadsden underneath. Though that's the way you want to attack Minnesota. So I think they may not try to run a lot here because I just think they want to just work around the Brian Flores defensive scheme.
Yeah, the short passing attack can be an extension of the run, and I think Herbert is uniquely capable of doing that. And the receivers they have, it's why you sign Keenan Allen. It's why you draft Rondé Gadsden to sort of be these guys. If they didn't have Gadsden, this is a different offense altogether, because you can have the Will Disleys and Tyler Conklins of the world, but they are not nearly as good after the catch. And we saw Rondé Gadsden in particular thrive last week. I had made the I had cautioned people on the waiver wire show on Monday that you're going to see the 157, a touchdown, 7 catches, and be like, man, where did this come from? Gadsden has had his work incrementally bumped up every single week as a way to negate the pass rush, because you have multiple tight ends out there. That's the way that they're helping the pass rush, but Gadsden can be the short check down threat. There were times that they used Gadsden split out. I think back to the touchdown that he ends up running for 45, 50 yards. That was just a singular coverage against a cornerback. You can do that for a guy like Gadsden, who is smaller for tight ends, but still big against NFL corners. I just don't know if you could do that against the Vikings is the part. Like, I think Brian Flores is uniquely good at kind of stopping that sort of stuff. And I think it's going to be more of check down city for Rondé Gadsden, see what he does after the catch. Let's just say I'm not chasing the points that happened from last week, if that's it. So let's move over to the receivers. There's a bit more questions related to that. Of course, you have Mike Evans now done for the season. We talked about that, the broken collarbone. Tez Johnson, does he become, let's just say, the top waiver wire pickup for you this week if he wasn't already last week? Because he ended up having a pretty good game, but that was in large part due to the circumstance that the Buccaneers trailing basically all of Monday night.
Look, they're going to throw. This team passes the ball. Baker Mayfield had a down game. And I tell you what, Tez Johnson should have had a lot more. Baker Mayfield was really erratic in that game. Give Baker a pass on that one. Games like that happen. He just was off a little bit, but he'll be fine. Does Tez Johnson weigh 150 pounds? I don't think he does. I don't care what the stats say. I don't think he weighs 150 pounds when I look at him. And I just wonder how long he's going to hold up. I really worry about that. But yeah, he's a live player. I mean, he is one that has some electric to him, and Baker Mayfield definitely extends plays. So that really bodes well. So I do think that Tez Johnson is a player that you could definitely take a chance on. Now, when we're looking at the game this week, they're playing New Orleans. I don't know how aggressive they have to get. I think even though this one's on the road, I do think Rachaad White can kind of get back on the map here. I think they can run the ball a bit. I think they're not going to be in a shootout. I don't expect a shootout at all. So they may not go very pass heavy. But Tez Johnson, with 6 teams off, he definitely is somebody that you can look at as an opportunity play.
Yeah, and important mentioning with Rachaad White, Bucky Irving, I think is trending positively, but the Buccaneers are on bye next week. It'd be really crazy for the Buccaneers to play Bucky Irving this week after he missed the past couple. So if you have him out, like, I think you're going to have Bucky Irving off the next 2 weeks. And then that's also why I think Chris Godwin probably doesn't play as well either. Now, I don't know what his status is. If you just watched Mike Evans leave, I think there's going to be a rush to go ahead and have that out there. Remember, Jalen McMillan still on injury reserve due to that neck injury in the preseason. We have not heard an update since early October on him, but theoretically, McMillan will be returning at some point. Like, there will be more assets added to this receiving group, but just not yet, and probably not after the bye.
Jalen McMillan, as of last week, is still in a neck brace. We talked on the Thursday Night High Stakes Fantasy Show on Sirius XM. We had the Bucks beat reporting. Rick Stroud, I think his name was.
Yes.
And he said that, no, he's like, don't count on him because he's literally still in a neck brace.
Okay. And I actually think Stroud's one of the better ones in covering teams. Did Stroud say that, like, McMillan might not play all season? Was that sort of the vibe that he was getting, or just not?
It was very cryptic. He wouldn't come out and say it, but it was like he is nowhere close.
Okay.
Like, the initial thought was week 9, and here we are. That was like pre-week 7, and he's like nowhere close.
Okay, interesting. So, I love getting that sort of reports and that stuff. All right, let's go over to the Bears and Caleb Williams, and again mentioning Lamar Jackson because we don't know if he is practicing this week or not. There was reports that he wasn't practicing Monday. I don't think that really matters. I don't know how many teams are practicing Monday anyway, especially with the Ravens off a bye.
Only from the bye. Yeah, only the bye weeks.
Yeah, well, whatever. Okay, that's just good. I need to know what Lamar practices Wednesday and Thursday, and even if he practices Friday, I'll feel better. Because if the Ravens don't have Lamar Jackson this week, they will lose to the Bears with the way the Bears have been playing. And if the Ravens lose this week, they're probably out of the AFC contention, sitting at 1-6 right now, or could be 1-6 after that Bears loss. So I'm assuming Lamar Jackson will be out there out of necessity. And if that's the case, the Bears offense kind of has to keep pace in that sort of circumstance. Caleb was a little bit erratic in the weathery conditions last week, but overall, I think Ben Johnson has been an awesome improvement to that team, and the offense is working. Might be a good get-right game, too, against a Ravens secondary that has allowed everything over the past month and a half. They should be healthier, yes, but this might not be a secondary that gets that just immediately is better just by getting healthy. Like, they have not played well basically all season.
Yeah, so you're right. The defensive secondary is getting healthier. They had a couple guys back in their last game. Wiggins was back, and I believe Humphrey was back. Top of my head,
Yes. Yeah,
but
he was. Yep.
the secondary will be in better shape. And now here's the funny thing: they what they did was they re-weaponized Kyle Hamilton. Remember they traded for Loie Gilman, the safety from the Chargers. What they did in the last game is they just moved Kyle Hamilton down in the box. It's like they have a safety fixing their run defense. How awesome is Kyle Hamilton that the safety could get an answer to your run defense? So that's interesting. So, I mean, look, they're going to smoke and mirrors it up on defense a little bit and give a few problems to opponents, but you can run on them. That the infrastructure, that run defense, the spine, not very good. But that said, the big deal for the Ravens is Patrick Ricard should be back. I talk about this like every week. He was practicing limited before the bye, so he should be back. That will force defenses to crash the bodies down in the box. And we're hoping Lamar plays. So it's all in that premise. Last year, Lamar was cooking when Ricard was on the field. He was going downfield to Bateman, downfield to Andrews. As soon as Ricard's back, the defenses have to play him that way. So Bateman's on a lot of waiver wires. He's going to be the same guy in the second half that he was last year. So pick him up if he's on your waiver wire. And Mark Andrews, if somebody dumped him, he's going to be back in the same spot as last year as soon as Ricard and Lamar are back. So be cognizant of that.
All right. Flip side on this, you have Roma Dunze listed in the red here as well, the maroon. DJ Moore probably in the same sort of spot as well too. Is this acknowledging that the Ravens secondary has gotten healthier, or is there some concerns that you have where the Bears? We always talk about path of least resistance. If you can just win the football game, having DeAndre Swift, Kyle Monangai run the ball, you do so. If you are Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams, is this an Dunze related thing, or more alluding to the Ravens run defense not being as good?
It's the fact I have Odunze ranked at wide receiver 8, and he has exactly one game over 70 yards. He had against Detroit, he had 128. He had touchdowns in his first 4 games. He hasn't scored in the last 2. At this point, I'm keeping Odunze as a wide receiver 1. But other than the touchdowns, his production has not been a wide receiver 1. This is a very, very cautious point here. And I almost am at the point where I would recommend. I think Odunze still has great trade value. And if you could get something in return that would be of a wide receiver 1 haul back, I would consider making that move because myself included, we are giving him a lot of credit for a 4-game touchdown streak with 2 of those games being against Las Vegas and Dallas.
Yeah, okay, that's a good point. I like that one. The other one that I saw in red, I'm interested in is Xavier Worthy listed, I think, receiver 18. Now, Rashee Rice makes his debut last week. I had told everyone, I don't think the Chiefs are going to force him the ball. Like, there's reasons to go ahead and have Rashee Rice get more involved as the season progresses, make sure he kind of gets his feet wet. Wrong. Couldn't have been more wrong about that. The way they were using him in the red zone was like, let's see if we get Rashee Rice getting 16 touchdowns here in 8 games. Like, it was the most force-fed I've ever seen a receiver. And frankly, Jim, I didn't realize the Raiders would roll over to the degree that they did. If I would have known they would be that pathetic of a team, yes, you could force feed to anybody. This is a confidence booster for everyone. You could have ran a couple yards against the Raiders and got you some confidence too, the way they were playing last week. So is Xavier Worthy as a red due to the matchup against the Commanders, who let the Cowboys go nuclear, but the Cowboys have done that against everyone? Or is this the return of Rashee Rice cutting into everyone's workload, including Xavier Worthy?
Yeah, my thought all along was, in the routes that Rice was running were the same things he was running last year when he was averaging 96 yards in those 3 games. He is a beast creating space. He is a beast after the catch. He could either run through you or make you miss. It is a great skill set he has. And I said before when he came back, I go, it's going to be Rashee Rice and then everybody else. And that's exactly what we saw. I don't think it was a 1-game thing. And it's going to be, and because now Hollywood Brown's healthy and he's playing really well.
Yes.
Xavier Worthy playing very well. And then Tyquan Thornton is going to get a target or 2 in games. Brashard Smith out of the backfield, they're ramping him into that Jerick McKinnon role. He's going to get some targets. And so that's going to be the problem. And Kelsey is going to get some targets. He had that 44-yard catch early, but again, only a few targets. So it's going to be Rice getting targets and everybody else splitting up the remains. And there is no clear number 2. And I'm sorry to the Xavier Worthy fans, but he was drafted to be a speed clear out guy. That's why he was drafted. They forced him into a different role when Rice was out. but Worthy is best used to maximize the offense by being a vertical threat.
Yeah, and I think that's the way that you build that receiving core for the Chiefs is almost opposite of how a lot of teams do it. You have a Juju Smith-Schuster who can be, I don't know, a 50% version of Rashee Rice. Travis Kelce does the same sort of role within the offense. You have Tyquan Thornton, Hollywood Brown, Xavier Worthy, that all can function as the deep threats. Like they have depth on top of depth on top of depth, and using all of them when healthy is the best way to sort of spread everything out. So I'm with you. I mean, I have to play Xavier Worthy. I think most people do. If you have him at 18, he's going to be in there, but more so saying the best days are at least behind him for right now. There'll be there's a few boom weeks, but the volume part of Xavier Worthy, I would imagine, will not be there in the immediate future. This is a curious question I had for you. We talked about weather last week. You've always been really good with that stuff too. You have talked about often when a team is favored by significant points. So in this case, this week, it's the Colts favored by 14.5 against the Titans. The only way the team gets there is that their stars end up producing basically the fantasy point total that you have in the half. So I know it's a misconception is probably the way to put it. Like, do I play Daniel Jones this week if the Colts murder the Titans, or do I have Michael Pittman in my lineup if in the scenario that the Colts go out ahead significantly? And you've always answered, and I want to make sure I'm not putting words in your mouth, but you've always answered the only way that happens is if guys like Daniel Jones and Michael Pittman end up doing well. So there's still plays for you this week, correct?
Yeah, they are, because this team is humming on offense, and there's no reason to think they won't hang 31 points, whether those points come in the first half or whether they come over 4 quarters of play. They're going to hang their 31 here. And so I think when you're doing that, I think you just roll with it. And look, maybe it's the game where Jonathan Taylor gets going running early and they get such a lead they never really have to pass. And that's in the range of outcomes. That's definitely in there. But I think if they're going to score their 31 points, I do think the passing game will be part of that.
Last one I'll ask for the receivers is the Niners situation. End up getting a surprising win against the Falcons last week. I know you talked about the Falcons doing well at home. I think they're the very inverse of home and away splits right now in terms of how they play, and especially that pass rush. But you have Mac Jones still doing things. Maybe Brock Purdy comes back this week. Juwan Jennings is dealing with 55 different injuries. And now Ricky Pearsall could end up being available this week. Texans defense is good. I think we're all going to get kind of lost in this with how bad the offense has been and the offensive line being once again horrible. But the Texans defense, I have a lot of respect for. Is this a low-scoring game where neither team ends up getting a lot of fantasy production, or does Kyle Shanahan just feed Christian McCaffrey and get them in position to score points again like they did last week?
Man, getting George Kittle back as a blocker last week, I know none of it, including me, do not want to hear back as a blocker. But I tell you what, that running game was so much different. And that's the thing with Atlanta. I want to point this out long-term so everybody's kind of on a page with this. Atlanta has this fast defense. If you get physical on them and you could bully them up front, and you can bully them, you can run the ball down their throats all day long if you got the personnel for it. Buffalo made the mistake of not doing it. I was stunned that 2 weeks ago Buffalo didn't come in, get 6 linemen, because they'll play 6 linemen. They should have gotten 6 linemen in, and they should have just gone downhill all night long on them. And I don't know what their game plan was, but it wasn't the right one. Kyle Shanahan had the right game plan. So yes, so the run game against Houston, I'm whether the run game is the run game or it's McCaffrey and the screen game, it's all the run game, like you say, Joe.
Yeah.
And so I just don't think, as good as Houston is, look, who cares about their corners? Who are they going to cover? Who do you have to cover? So what?
Right.
You know, they'll sacrifice the receivers to those corners. All right, this will be a Kittle week then. It'll continue being a McCaffrey week. It'll be whoever they need to throw to. Middle of the field is vulnerable, though. You can throw over the middle of the field, and with the receivers, they have all of them can go in the middle. I just don't know which one will eat. But one of them will get open in the middle of the field. But this is really a Kittle game to me, because the middle of the field is where you attack them. And, of course, it's always a McCaffrey week.
I like the Kittle game coming. Okay, that's good to know. I mean, like, if you have Kittle, you wade through all the injury stuff, you're playing them regardless, but it had to be frustrating last week where he didn't end up getting a lot of production. I do think that turns around to some extent as the season progresses, but maybe ends up being this week against the Titans. Let's move over to the tight end position. We'll start first with one I'm surprised with, even though he's ranked number 20, Noah Fant against the Jets.
Yeah,
And
I know.
let's discuss this a little bit. We're talking about maybe a tight end one if you are in a really deep or in a desperate situation. This is probably not something we need to focus a lot of a conversation overall on, but I'm interested because you have Joe Flacco throwing really well at T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. The Jets are I mentioned the Raiders being just completely inept and rolling over. The Jets have done that basically all season long. It certainly could do that against the Bengals this week, but putting Tyrod Taylor in at quarterback, he did end up doing better in the times that Fields was injured. Maybe there's going to be a bit more teeth from this Jets defense, and that was supposed to be their strength entering this year. So why are you so high on Noah Fant this week?
Because the possibility that they throw the ball in the middle of the field. If for some reason Cincinnati has to score points, they might not need to. They might not need to. But if they do, he clearly emerged because remember, Gesicki's on the IR. And that gets Fant a few more snaps. Fant is their de facto slot receiver. They'll put Yoshi Voss on the field, but he's not a slot guy, really. They'll move Chase in there. It's nice. But Fant is going to be like more of a slot receiver for them, I think. And I think that when they want to throw to the middle of the field, he's going to be a little bit of a focal point. Obviously, I have him at tight end 20 because he might get one target. But there could be an emerging role for him. And we saw him using the red zone last week. If they go in the red zone and let's say the opposing defense, they put a double bracket on Higgins and Chase, Joe Flacco's just going to throw to the middle. He's going to default to the tight end. And that will happen in the red zone. They'll try to gum it up on the outside receivers. And so Fant has an opportunity here. That's all I think I'm going with there.
The tight end 12 through 16 is very fascinating because it's been basically the guys that I have waffled between all years, my tight ends. I've talked about in the waiver wire articles, and I have gotten them wrong more often than not. I did play Rondé Gadsden in a lot of places last week. That was not out of Joe Bartel being smart, out of Joe Bartel being desperate, but here you go, have him at 12. You have Juwan Johnson at 13, ends up getting a bit more targets now this past week when a lot of people are dropping him. And then Harold Fannin, we'll have to see. David Njoku is practicing today, at least. Whether he returns or not doesn't really impact things for Harold Fannin. I've just been annoyed that passing attack literally has zero teeth whatsoever, but Harold Fannon's been good. Let's just say rest of season, Mason Taylor, Rondé Gadsden, Harold Fannin. Is there one that you feel comfortable, like that you might have to play? Because I somebody asked this on Twitter and I actually said Mason Taylor because I think Tyrod Taylor makes the offense better. Yes. Garrett Wilson being out a determined amount of time. And I think Mason Taylor is pretty good, whereas Rondé Gadsden's got 4 or 5 guys ahead of him. And I have no idea what to make of Harold Fannin and the Browns being able to do anything. So rest of season, those 3 guys, like which one do you like a little bit more?
Yeah, Mason Taylor is the more the season goes on, the more he becomes their de facto number 2 receiver. Garrett Wilson's a short-term injury. I don't know if he plays this week, but he'll be back soon enough. And yeah, Tyrod Taylor, we said we can move a passing him. I got an allergy out here, so I'm sorry about that. So anyway, yes, I think Mason Taylor is going to have to get targets. They're going to trail almost every week. Mm-hmm. Maybe they trade away Breece Hall, and that's going to be even more targets. So I think Mason Taylor is going to get more PPR production as the season goes on.
Another tight end I get asked about a lot is Cade Otton now and again with Mike Evans out, whether Cade Otton gets used more or if it's just a 1-week thing against the Saints, then the Buccaneers on bye. Again, theoretically, Chris Godwin could return after the bye. Bucky Irving could return after the bye. Is Cade Otton rest of season someone you like with Mike Evans out, or is this a 1-week play if you need to for against the Saints?
The expectation is Godwin will be back after the bye, and Ibuka is going to get healthier each week, and after the bye, he should be fully healthy. Cade Otton had a great situation. A, they were trailing by a boatload of points. B, both safeties were out for Detroit. I don't think that this week's fine. This week, I have Otton at tight end 25. I don't know how much they need him. I think there's a lower scoring game, like I said earlier. I think Ibuka and Tez Johnson and Rachaad White are probably enough because if it's a pass heavy script, I think Otton looks better. But I just don't think they're going to need him this week. And then after the bye, I don't think that's just they've proven. I know the coach changed this year from last year, but they've proven when they have enough receivers in the field, the tight end's not a priority.
From tight end 25 to the one right above 5, Dalton Kincaid listed at 4 right now. Kincaid missed the Bills' previous game, then was on bye. My understanding was if that had not been a bye week there, maybe Kincaid does play. The Bills are just playing it safe with playoff aspirations. I assume he will be back healthy here against the Panthers. Another situation, theoretically, where the Bills are possibly ahead by a decent amount of points. In that scenario, I feel like Kincaid's probably been a factor in that. So Kincaid being listed at 4, is that in relation to the matchup or just the value that he has been to that offense, which we think will be pretty good this week?
We've seen Kincaid be one of their more targeted players. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but Kincaid is competing with Shakir probably for targets most weeks. Kent Coleman's not a factor if they're in unless they're trailing like week 1 or they're in a shootout, which rarely happens. So like Coleman doesn't get many targets. And so basically it's the Kincaid and Shakir offense. And Kincaid is more of a red zone option for Josh Allen. So the ranking has to stay high because they're going to score points. Josh Allen's going to throw his touchdown passes, but he clearly prefers to go with Kincaid down in the red area.
Yeah, that's a good point. And we had Dawson Knox early in Kincaid's career be that red zone guy. Now it's interesting that Kincaid has flipped that as well, being more volume based too. We always talk about tight ends taking their time to getting to be a factor. It's funny, Kincaid, his rookie year, was I guess like Sam Laporta was valued more than Kincaid, or at least we talked about Sam Laporta fantasy wise more. Them both disappoint last year. Now we're both back to having Laporta and Kincaid being in somewhere in the mix in that. I think that does it for me, at least in the weekly ranking. Any more tight ends you want to talk about yet before we end today's show?
Hey, Juwan Johnson bounced back last week. He had a few down weeks. This is a game I expect it to be lower scoring, but Tampa could get a lead. And if Tampa gets a lead, look, I keep saying Juwan Johnson is a good football player. And when they decide to throw him the ball, he is very effective. Tampa blitzes a lot. And that means Rashid Shaheed may not have time for any longer developing routes. So this could be a game where Juwan Johnson, I put in the downside because he had a number of bad games, but this is a game where they might need him as a blitz breaker.
There you go. All right. Well, that does it for us at the weekly ranking edition here with Jim Coventry. Every Wednesday morning, we do it around the same time. Appreciate you guys all following along. Hopefully, you can get through by Mageddon. Reminder, you can go ahead and ask Jim about any lineup-related questions 2 hours before kickoffs on Sunday. We don't have the London games anymore. Thankfully, we have no more double header Monday games as well too. So all that is out of the mix now. We just have to get through 10 teams on bye over the next 2 weeks, which is an enormous thing to try to overcome, but hopefully we can get you to the right place. Jim Coventry NFL on Twitter does the same thing. JB Fantasy Sports as well. Happy to help you out. And then look at the Wavewire article I have posted up on RotoWire. We'll do another update later today. If you have any questions, the RotoWire Discord, I'm always available to go ahead and get to answer questions that way as well too. And YouTube 15 gets you 15% off RotoWire subscription to the site itself. So appreciate you all listening. We'll back in next week.